That takes us to our moment of Braben. Every week, we play a clip of David Braben from back in the day, listen to what he had to say about ideas and concepts and sort of how development should be done and things that he wants for the game and whatnot. And then we look at that through the lens of where are we at today? What are we seeing? Is this good? Is this bad? What has been given, delivered upon? What is yet to be delivered upon? I want to say to the people in the chat that I'm absolutely positive, despite this very clear disclaimer, are going to say, this is clickbait. That's David Braben from years ago. Yes, that's what I've just explained. If English is hard for you, then perhaps, you know what? Keep saying that it's clickbait. That's great. It's just more chat in the video comment section. So that actually, for the metrics, that helps. So you know what, you crazy little diamonds of stupidity, you're helping us. Thank you very much, and we salute you. And here, without any further ado, is David Braben.
So I'm here today to talk about procedural generation, what it is and why it's relevant today. I've been doing it for nearly 30 years, and it's where art meets science. Now, all of us, without realizing it perhaps subconsciously, follow rules. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, because it's behind this whole process. So think, for example, of a constable painting. It's a beautiful scene that the artist has rendered, sort of real life, but with details subtly accentuated. It's very, very rich, and within it are a lot of rules. Think of the trees in the scene. You know, we look at the way the branches come out, how often they come out, the leaves, the color, the bark, all of those details. You know, what makes it an oak, a hornbeam, or even a tree. And Constable was subconsciously following those very same rules when he was painting it, because it would look strange. As people, we're really, really good at spotting things that don't look right, at spotting things that break those rules. Imagine artist tools, an airbrush. So there's a lot of physics in an airbrush, the viscosity of the paint, the speed of the motor, where the artist holds away from the paper. And it creates a beautiful pattern in the artist's control. Now, imagine an art package. A lot of us use art packages today rather than actual paint. The designers of that art package will have exactly, as best they can, mimicked what an airbrush does. You know, the artist does the controls in very much the same way as they do with a physical airbrush. But what happens is then inside the computer, it simulates that science. And then an array of dots comes out, essentially with each dot coming out in a random position. Now, imagine doing that with clouds, where each little dot is a bit of cloud, or hillside, where what you're doing is you're building up piles of soil to make a landscape exactly like just what you want to imagine, like we saw in the Constable paintings. Imagine then flicking a switch and spraying again, but this time spraying trees, except where the system enforces those rules, it makes sure the branches don't intersect, or that the trees aren't close to each other. So then imagine that artist creating many such hillsides and looking at them and tweaking them until they look like a real hillside. Now, we can aggregate that, we can look at that and build up what those rules that the artist has followed, and then present back to the artist hillsides created using those same rules. Now, the artist can look at it and say, well, those trees going down to the shoreline, they don't look right, and he can tweak them. And you can use that to refine the rules. But at the end of the process, you have a set of rules that creates hillsides that are pleasing to that particular artist. Now, some of you in the room will know I've been creating games for a very, very long time. And the fantastic thing with the sort of approach I'm talking about, procedural generation, is using it to create environments where games can take place. Huge environments to explore, which are created randomly. So the great thing is, all you need to do is store those rules. Except there's obviously a problem, because if you're doing it randomly, it will be different every single time, and that's not what we want. But then there is a magical part of mathematics, which is number sequences. This guy, Leonardo Fibonacci, suggested a number sequence in a book over 800 years ago, in 1202. And actually, even he didn't invent the sequence that's now named after him. He referred to an earlier, sadly unnamed, Indian mathematician who came up with the idea. So this sequence is a sequence of numbers where you take two numbers, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, add them together, creates another number in the sequence, and you keep doing that until you end up with an arbitrary long sequence. So we have a sequence of numbers getting ever bigger. But then imagine looking at just the last 3 digits of each number. They look pretty random. And the point is, think of them as dice rolls. It's a bit like knowing all of the dice rolls in advance as they come. And the beautiful thing about it is that's uniquely defined precisely by those first 2 numbers that we thought of, we call the seed. So in other words, from that seed flows a sequence of numbers as long as you like, as many as you like, and they will always be the same if you start off with the same seed. Now, the first game that I co-wrote was a game called Elite that I wrote while at university with a colleague. And that, within it, had whole galaxies created that way. So from it came the name of planets, their position, the positions of the stars, their governments, their economies. It was hugely rich. And it all came for free. Even the names. I remember we were looking at it, trying to get names that were pronounceable, where you didn't get phlegm on the screen, because that's what came out, using essentially things called phonemes. And I also remember having beauty parades of galaxies. We'd have whole galaxies that we'd look at and reject galaxies because they were either lopsided or they had holes in them, or they didn't quite look right. We could even make up sentences to describe them, because they're also based on rules. And it's the rules here. This is where the science comes in, and the art is what works, what feels right. Now, procedural generation has been used ever since. Games like Minecraft have used it very, very successfully. But there's also bad procedural generation. We see sort of cities going on forever. We see things where you can see the patterns. They're too simplistic. It's too obviously computer generated. And the problem with that is essentially it's bad art, if you like. You know, that it's no fault of the procedural generation. I mean, if you think of the earliest form of procedural generation is probably wallpaper, where the repeating pattern, the artist thinks of the pattern in such a way that disguises the fact it's going to be made on a roll, that it's got to repeat. But it's got this one overriding rule that you fundamentally can't disguise. And the fantastic thing about the digital domain is there is a lot more flexibility, so the artist has much more art in it. If you like, bad procedural generation is art that hasn't felt the love of an artist. Now, this way, we can make whole planets. The amazing thing with these sort of techniques is what you can do with them. I still think that it's a bit like going into a shop and seeing a Blu-ray for 10p or a brand new car for £10. It's too good to be true. But I've been doing it now for 30 years, and I haven't yet found the catch. So the moon, easy to make the moon, sphere, put craters on it to taste. The other good thing is for Earth-like worlds, artists are great at looking at the Earth, looking at the various areas, you know, tropical areas, icy areas, and saying what looks right and what doesn't quite look right. So we start off with continents, using plate tectonics, build up mountains, all that sort of thing, put water, put vegetation, put clouds. You see that clouds form in turbulent areas downwind of mountains. But what we can also do is we can vary it. We can use the science. We know where there are cold areas, ice forms. The artists already told us that. But we also know in the boundary areas where things are in shadow, you'll see snow. You know, we know what that looks like from space. We know what it looks like on the ground. And that's fantastic. But we can also vary it. We can tilt the planet. We can cool it, as you see here, where you're left with a narrow band that's habitable. So out of that, we get, once we've gone through this loop a lot, we get the artist produces a mature set of rules. But we can also apply those same rules to alien worlds, like we see here. We know the chemistry of those alien worlds. From that, we get the various colors. We know the elements and compounds that will be there. And the artist can still look at it and say, well, that doesn't look right. And we can use that to work out why it might not be right, and to double-check the science. Maybe we've got the viscosity of the atmosphere wrong or whatever. Now, bizarre rules happen in the world as well. Imagine an artist. Imagine Picasso. we're all very used to recognizing what is a Picasso, not just because we recognize an individual painting. We know the way he does eyes, we know the way he messes with the world, because he usually messes with the world in a very similar way. And you look at it, and you know it's a Picasso. Now, people who are expert at Picassos, they will look at it, and they will even be able to place it almost exactly when he painted it, even without having seen the particular Picasso we're showing. You know, they know that because Picasso's own rules change through time. Doubtless, he didn't think he was obeying rules, but he was. That's how we recognize it as a Picasso, you know, blue period, cubism, all of that sort of thing. So summing up, this is where art meets science. It's an amazing tool in the hand of artists. You look at a place like this, look at the arches, look at all the boxes, the uniformity of it. It's beautiful. And it follows rules. And it's those rules that make it beautiful.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. So, right off the bat, I want to say, David Braben saying that the human eye has the ability to spot bad proc-gen and copy pasta, whatnot. I feel like somewhere, Black Maze just felt the disturbance force and was like, what? Something's happening. What's going on? Yeah, that, I think, is particularly telling in the era that we're in at the moment, as far as I think there are some amazing planets out there, and I think there are some really bad planets out there. And I pray to God that once Frontier tells us, okay, the Planet Tech is now operating as intended, because I'm still holding out hope. I'm a person that is holding out hope that the Planet Tech is actually great, and that we're just seeing the effect of a bug that makes it sort of shitty right now. The things that I took from that is David Braben saying that the human eye can spot bad proc-gen or copies is a massive, you know, like, yeah. And I pray to God that that's a thing that gets fixed when the bugs get fixed. And the second point that I want to take about it is when you saw the way that he was demonstrating how those Earth-like worlds got, you know, generated, and then the interesting things with, like, hey, you can change, this one is more temperate climate, this one is more tropical climate, this one is a more ice age planet. I thought that was fascinating and interesting, and I definitely hope that as the bugs get resolved, we see good Planet Tech, because that's the one thing that I'm hanging my hat on that I really pray came out well in Odyssey.
You know, after watching that video, I feel kind of bad in a kind of nostalgic way for those halcyon days when David could present at the Royal Albert Hall, and the future of Elite was bright and full of promise. Now, although there are some beautiful planets, we also have planets with, to paraphrase some of his terms, phlegm-textured surfaces and detectable repeating patterns that apparently haven't felt the love of an artist. Yeah, it just made me sad.
Yeah, that love of an artist line hit me like a gut punch. I was like, oh, that hurt. Aaron.
Yeah, I almost peed myself. I'm not going to lie. When he said that the art is what works and what feels right, I was weeping. And it is kind of sad. I agree with Roy. I mean, you look back and you look at how the games, you know, came out and how it was being developed towards the beginning, and there is still so much of that potential that you can see in the game, and it's just inhibited by what he was talking about in that speech, which is the science of it, the math of it, and not being able to get the game to a point where it's playable without these bugs that just rip you out of the immersion is really taking away from the art that I think could be there otherwise. So it is kind of sad.
Absolutely. Tweak.
Well, to me, agreed with everything everybody just said. It's terribly depressing, but what it brings to my mind is, again, just David Braben knows all this stuff. You can't tell me if he sat down and looked at the Planet Tech working as is that he wouldn't pick all that stuff out. So what it really says to me is just how involved is he in Elite Dangerous, not even on a day-to-day basis, but at all? Is he now just a businessman that signs checks and hopes to make a lot of money? Does he not have anything to do with Elite in order to miss all that kind of thing? It's puzzling to me. Unless
the Planet Tech is good, and it's just the bugs that's causing us to see problems at the moment. Like, we don't know yet. Maybe I get where you're coming from, And if after they say it's working as intended, we still see, stamps over and over and over, then yes, 100%. But there's a chance that it's just a matter of... now, yes, this is indicative of another sin, which is releasing a game that wasn't finished, of course. But, after it's fixed, then we should judge the planet. But I just wanted to bring that up because of, last week's episode, how we discussed this. I think it really needs to be highlighted. Of all of the people that we could sort of expect to do it right, David Braben is at the top of that list for me. You're right. If it turns out that the planet tech is bad, then the statement that you just made is 100% spot on the money of I guess David's not steering the ship anymore. And I would love to see that change. I would love to see David take direct control of Elite again. And, what is it? Make Elite great again? Juki, hop in on this.
Yeah, I just want to kind of take a view on the proc-gen system, because he talks about a mathematical model of generating a couple of numbers and everything after that is deterministic, but, deterministically random. And, that's the kind of things that I've been grappling with at the moment. And it seems completely unfeasible that you would end up with these repeating patterns that are all over the place. Because we saw a hell of a lot of that in last week's stream of, all of these really obviously stamped out canyons and shapes and things like that. And that doesn't actually make any kind of sense from a mathematical perspective. How can that happen if everything is randomly generated? So it kind of seems like they're taking shortcuts and taking liberties with it, and that really sucks, because the explorers are really going to feel the pain of that. The whole purpose of going out into the black and exploring is to find new things that you can't see anywhere else, right?